Hey everyone, welcome back. Over the past couple of months, I have read over 10 books on creativity. And there's one theme, one thing that runs as a red thread throughout every single one of those books. And it's this: creativity is a paradox. In today's video, we're going to talk about how to manage the tensions between the paradox of creativity, whether that be clarity and craziness, subtraction and addition, pain and love, the seen and the unseen, and experience and naivete. If you want to learn more about creativity, books on creativity, different ideas that surround creativity, feel free to subscribe. It would mean a ton to me. I put out a video every single week talking about things that I've been musing on, ideas that I've been chewing on, different non-fiction books that I've been really enjoying. So feel free to subscribe. Come listen to me yap. Okay, so the first point, craziness and clarity. What do I mean by craziness and clarity? In order to create work that you're really proud of, in order to create anything in the very first place, you have to be crazy enough to think that you're able to accomplish pretty much anything. I love what Elizabeth Gilbert says. She writes this in her book, Big Magic. You can get it in the link below. She poses this question, and it has a lot to do with identity, creative identity. And at the heart of it, she says this: do you have the courage to bring forth the treasures that are hidden within yourself? And I love that quote because this is where the paradox of creativity lies. Another way I put it is you have to be sober-minded enough to be crazy. And what I mean by that is that when you create something, what you're saying is that I have the capacity to bring something into the world. And yet you have to have the sober-mindedness to recognize that the thing that you brought into the world isn't quite as good as you wanted it to be. But it's that sense of craziness and clarity. That's the first paradox that we're addressing. The second paradox that I want to talk through is this idea that Austin Kleon writes in his book, Steal Like an Artist. And it's the idea that art is actually subtraction. And what I posed in the beginning is that tension between, to add to the piece, sometimes you have to actually subtract from the piece. I love what he writes here on page 138, and it says this: the right constraints can lead to the very best work. My favorite example, he puts with a question mark, which is hilarious. Dr. Seuss wrote The Cat in the Hat with 236 different words. And then it goes on to say he was challenged to write a book, a kid's book, obviously, Dr. Seuss, Cat in the Hat, etc., so on and so forth. He was challenged to write a book with 50 words, and that's when he wrote Green Eggs and Ham, all of our childhood favorite, I don't know what I'm trying to say here, our childhood favorite book. And that's the thing, oftentimes we think that to be a creative, to actually do the work, we need a million different ingredients, and we need 1,000 different palettes to paint on, and we need a bajillion different people to reference. But the thing is, to create really good art, it's to distill something down to its very essence, the bare bones of what actually makes the project itself. I'll give you an example of this in my own life. When I was finishing up my master's degree, I had a dissertation to write, and it was only a 20,000 word dissertation, but I was writing, and when I looked up, I was at over 30,000 words, which isn't great when you're trying to actually write something that gets graded well. What I had to do was I had to cut back everything that honestly I thought was great to the very essence of what I was trying to communicate within my dissertation. Another example of this is this idea called killing the unicorn. This idea of killing the unicorn is that project that you've been working on that's like you're so passionate about it, and you've got, maybe you're writing a book and you've got a chapter in there that you absolutely love, but it just does not fit within the project. And perhaps you're writing a song and the lyrics that you've crafted, they don't fit within the motif of the song narrative that you're trying to communicate. Or maybe you're running a business and there's a certain product that you love, but it just doesn't fit within where the company is going. The best part about creativity and the paradox of creativity is to add value to something. Sometimes you have to remove it entirely, and to kill the unicorn is to take that brilliant idea that you cherish and hold so dear, so close to your chest, and you have to kill it. You have to remove it from the project. And what you'll find is the things that you removed oftentimes become their own projects in and of itself, but that's another video entirely. So that's the second paradox. Subtraction often leads to addition. And the third paradox is love oftentimes correlates with pain. I think in modern society, we think love is these ooey gooey feelings, and sometimes it can be. I mean, I love my wife. Shout out to my wife. But the paradox about creativity is that the suffering that you engage in, the resistance that you feel, actually equates to how much love you have for the project you're working on. And this is the idea that Steven Pressfield talks about in his book, The War of Art, also linked below, we'll feel these unseen forces pushing against our creativity, whether that be procrastination, whether that be fear, whether that be a low self-esteem. There's so much resistance that pushes against the things that we care tremendously for, and the reason for that is because to create is to be vulnerable. The thing is, the more that you love something, the more resistance you're going to come up against. The tension between pain and love is that you never really become an expert with it. But stick around to the last point because I'm going to address that, what it means to be experienced and naive. We'll get there in a second. Perhaps you've written an album and you're like, I just really want the world to see this, but something holds me back. Or maybe that you've wanted to be a baker your entire life, but you haven't had the courage to start the bakery. Or maybe you want to write a book and you get through 80 or 90% of it. Hello, it's talking to myself here. Perhaps you get through 80 or 90% of it, and then that last 10 to 20% you can't seem to muster up. The reason for that is what Steven Pressfield calls resistance, and he writes this: resistance is directly proportionate to love. This is on page 42. If you're feeling massive resistance, the good news is it means there's a tremendous love there too. The creativity paradox is the more that you care about something, the less likely you are to do it, because the more pressure and expectation you place on the projects. And in order to hold this intention, you have to recognize the love and recognize the resistance and take small steps towards actualizing the creativity that you want the world to see. And once you've engaged with love and pain, then comes to the question of bringing the unseen things, that is the inspiration that we engage with and the ideas that we catch, into the seen, physical, tactile world. A lot of this idea comes from Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, which is, boop, here. Nifty editing, am I right? Rick Rubin writes this on page 279, and it says, with unshakable faith, we work under the assumption that the problem is already solved. What he means by that is that we have to have a clear vision of what we're trying to achieve, understanding that we can see it in our minds. We know what it could look like, and yet we don't have the capacity to bring that thing that we don't currently see into the seen world. It's having a vision of what your art could be. I have a friend, and whenever he hits a roadblock and whenever he needs inspiration, he actually has a folder on his laptop, and it's called The Mind. And he's got different textures, different colors, different photos that he's taken throughout his travels and such. And he goes there and he kind of explores, he walks through it. It's almost like you're in a forest and you're feeling the wet moss and the smooth stones and the rough bark. You have to be willing to get inspiration from the most unseen places. And then from that place of the unseen creative ideas that you cultivate, then you have to bring those ideas into the real world, the tactile world, the world in which we inhabit on a daily basis. And creativity strikes at the most random times. We have to be ready to capture it. But what happens after years and years and years of capturing these moments of creativity, we finally enter into the last paradox that I want to talk about in regards to creativity. And that's what it means to be experienced and also be naive. To give you an example of this experienced naivety paradox, there was once a skier, and he was renowned. He was one of the best skiers in the world. And one day he was at a tavern, he was chatting with his friends, and then this young hotshot walks in, kind of touting, boasting his chest and talking about how good he is, how fast he can go down the slopes. And it's all about the certain angle that he's holding his skis. And he sees this old guy, and he starts chatting with him, and the old guy is kind of calm and reserved. And the young guy tells him, oh, if you want to learn how to ski, this is what you have to do. And he's talking to this guy, and everyone is looking at them at this moment because everyone else knows that this young hotshot gun is talking to one of the most experienced skiers in the world. But what happens next is the most fascinating thing. After the young guy gets through his entire spiel, the old man, he looks up at him and he says, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And that's it. And what the story illustrates is the age-old paradox that the more you know, the less you really know. The more that you learn, the more that you engage in your creative domain, the more that you realize that there is always going to be a Picasso or a Mozart or a Michelangelo. There's always going to be somebody who is far and exceedingly above where you're currently at. And I'm pulling this idea of experience and naivete from Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's book, Creativity, and it's all about the psychology of learning and cognition and ideas and how we get them. And the thing that he identifies, the factors that make up a creative person, is that they are not disillusioned to know that true creativity in its final form is a return back to the beginning of being a creative. It's digging down far enough into your domain to resurface and to realize the things that you learned, whether it be the paradox of clarity and craziness, of addition and subtraction, of love and pain, of the unseen things and the seen things, and finally, to experience in naivete, is that when you look around at that resurfacing, you realize that you have just begun. Thanks again so much for watching. If you want to watch individual reviews of every book that I referenced in this video, feel free to click the links below, and I'll see you next week. See you later.